Last week, you had the opportunity to meet Kristen from Simply Joy Creations and listen to her journey as a small business owner and creator. Now, in this week's episode, I'm going to dive into a topic that I absolutely love: creating vignettes. This is a powerful way to attract buyers and really set your vendor booth apart from others. I hope you join me today as I give you my top 10 tips in creating a vignette.
Welcome to the Rescued and Upcycled podcast with weekly inspiration, tips on trying new techniques, and overall real talk about owning your own DIY business. Now here's your host, Sonnet Ullenbrock.
Welcome back to Rescued and Upcycled. I'm your host, Sonnet Ullenbrock, and I want to thank you all for joining me. Last week, I did my very first interview, and I hope you guys enjoyed meeting Kristen and listening to her journey as a small business owner. I really hope to get better and better at my interviewing skills. But honestly, you guys, Kristen made that first interview so easy. So now this week, let's talk all things vignettes. You may be asking yourself, what is a vignette? This is something that I strive to get better and better at consistently. Every time I put up a new display, I am looking at my vignettes or my displays, as some may call it, and I just want to create an experience. So if you're not familiar with that term, vignette, it is truly just a grouping of decorative objects that are pleasing to the eye. So let's dive into what makes a great vignette. First and foremost, creating a vignette for your vendor booth is just a powerful way to attract buyers and really set your space apart in your store where your booth is located. A well-designed vignette not only showcases your items, but also tells a story for your customers. So, by strategically placing or grouping your items together, this will draw customers into your booth and encourage them to imagine how they can use these items in their homes and their lives. Customers are truly seeking more than just products and services when they visit a store. They want to be inspired. Think of yourself as a creator. You are always looking at being inspired by different images. You're on Pinterest, you're scrolling through, looking at different images, trying to get inspiration. That is what your customer is doing when they're walking by your booths. They want to see something and be inspired by that. So when they walk past a booth and all the items are lying flat or unorganized, they just walk right by. You have to have something eye-catching in that booth. Customers want an experience, and one way to give them that experience is through beautifully curated and styled vendor booths. This creates a very welcoming and visually appealing booth that customers are drawn into. And that's what you want to do. You want to make them stop and get drawn into your booth. They are more likely than to linger, browse, and ultimately make a purchase from your booth if you can get them in. So, now I have some homework for you guys. The first thing I do recommend is go to your favorite home decor store or boutique. This is where you're going to do your homework. You are going to find some of the best vignettes in these stores. So while you're there, I want you to look at the different elements that they have included in their arrangements or their vignettes. Which ones are you drawn to? So as you're walking through the store, what vignettes draw you to that space, and try to figure out what you really like about them. It could be different interesting objects or color combinations or a combination of objects. The layout, just really take note as to what is drawing you to that. And also look at how they vary the heights, what color combinations they're using, maybe symmetry. Just that is the homework that I'm going to give you. That is the first thing I'd recommend doing. So if you are new to vignettes and you have not created any displays before, you feel like you need a little help, start with this piece of homework and then come back and we are going to apply it to what you have on hand. First and foremost, the tip number one I'm going to give you is you want to create a theme or tell a story. So when I think of a theme, start by deciding on what is going to tie all your pieces together. So you have a lot of pieces as a picker, and you need to create some type of theme to bring all your pieces together. You're picking a lot of one-offs, guys. So this is really going to help you with that. Because a vignette should tell a story, it's important to think about a theme beforehand. So, what I try to do, or what I like to do when I am starting to create a vignette or display, is I go out and I start looking at all my pieces. And I personally try to think of a color combination first that's going to drive my theme or my story. Now, again, we do not have the luxury to pick up a catalog or go online and have everything picked for us or pick everything for us. And typically, a store does have where they can go online, and wherever they're buying from typically has color combinations and items that will go well together. Because we are pickers and we are getting one offs, it's not as easy for us to do this. So, my one A tip is we need to get a little bit more organized. And this is something that I have truly been working on. We have to know what is in our stash or our inventory so that when we start pulling items for our vignette, it makes it so much easier. So, what I like to do after I go thrifting, and what I'm trying to do, is I want to keep like items grouped together. I want to also have, so like all my baskets together, all my blankets together, whatever I am picking, I want to try to keep those items together, all my glassware. So, when I start creating a vignette, very quickly at a glance, I can start picking items for that specific vignette. And that is also another takeaway, is that when you are thrifting and picking, you cannot put all those items in the booth together. I know you want to get them in your booth as quick as possible, but you also want to make it very eye appealing. Now, keep in mind, this is something that I have been working on, so do not feel bad if you need to work on this as well. So just a little thought or takeaway here. So if you are creating a theme of like vintage kitchen, you might include some cookware, some recipe boxes, aprons. Just really stick to your theme, but don't be afraid to mix and match different items or eras as well. So, some theme ideas would be like the holidays, spring, summer, fall, winter. You can go with like rustic or naturals. You could do like nautical, whatever theme that you are wanting to go with. Just start brainstorming those and writing them down. So, after you have an idea of what your theme or your story of your vignette is going to be, you want to choose a focal point. A focal point is going to be your largest item or your tallest. This is going to be the center of your vignette, and it really should be possibly the most colorful or most interesting piece. Select one item as your focal point in your vignette. And so, to give you, if you guys have been following my lives at all, I am starting to create vignettes for antique acres. I found, or someone gave me, a dresser. This is a very tall dresser, and that is going to be one of my focal points for my vignette at Antique Acres. I'm going to have several different vignettes there, but this is the piece that I am going to make my main focal point. So, some other things that you can think of, like even a vintage mirror, just something that's going to draw the buyer's attention and serve as a visual anchor and inspiration for your vignette. So once you have that piece, what I did is I determined at that point, I found that piece and then I chose my color palette based on that piece. But after you have that all set, then you're going to start adding layers, you guys. So you're going to start with this largest item. You're going to place that first, and then you're going to start bringing in some of your smalls and your mediums. Well, medium pieces first, then smalls. And don't be afraid with these layers to stack like furniture. Yes, definitely put, protectors on the bottom of the pieces. You don't want to scratch the tops, but you want to start stacking furniture or chairs. You can also stack like books, suitcases, picnic baskets. Take an antique desk. Last year, I had this antique vintage desk. I loved it. And I stacked I started layering on it. I stacked some vintage suitcases. I put a fan on it. You can use ladders to show off smaller pieces. So, some other things that you may want to include in your vignette would be like baskets, trays, platters, table runners, some different crates or boxes. And then the height goes right along with layering. So as you start layering your items, you're going to want to add some height to your booth. You don't want everything to be just flat. That is so boring and stiff to have everything lying flat on a surface. So start stacking, nesting, and varied heights to create depth and interest. One of the most important aspects of a pleasing vignette is usually to vary the height. That is really very important. And I started working with vignettes when I was on the road. I determined very quickly what I did not like about other people's vendor booths when I was setting up at a vendor event is many people just would pop up a table and lay everything flat. And let me tell you, people just walked by. I decided very quickly I was going to layer, add height and layer things with boxes and crates and just have different pieces within your booth to help with that. Now, creating balance and symmetry is essential in achieving a visually pleasing and harmonious, display as well. So consider, also having like equal distribution, distribute objects across your vignette. Also have mirrored objects. So have mirrors or shiny objects. Then you have to start when you're adding pieces, think of color coordination as well. So these are all, tips within layering and adding height. So, tip number 5. Now we're going to consider using groups of like objects and using those in odd numbers. I always say odds versus evens. It's just more appealing to the eye, you guys. So, if you have a collection of similar objects, rather than spreading those objects all around, group them together to create a bold look. This really does create a striking vignette. So I love doing that. For instance, I had several glass bottles. I love getting like vintage bottles, and I took a vintage book. I laid the book down. I added the largest bottle on that book to give it a little height. And then I added additional vintage bottles around. And then I added some, faux greenery around it as well. So it's as simple as that. That can be a tiny little vignette. Rolling pins. I'm slightly obsessed with rolling pins. Rather than just set those about randomly here and there, take an old crock and set them, have them all displayed in an old crock. So just collections. I love McCoy pottery. I would never sell it. I keep it all. I hoard it myself. But if you had a bunch of vintage pots, you can display those together as well. Again, more impactful together as a group versus individually. Especially if you have that many, I would definitely do it. Tip number 6, add different textures, guys. I am addicted to textures. And really, textures translate into interest. One of the most important elements to use in a vignette is texture. You'll want to use those different textures within that same vignette multiple times. So, really, if you think about it, like contrast smooth and rough items, combine natural with some man-made, introduce different shapes and forms. But I like to incorporate like soft, textiles. So, adding blankets, adding pillows. You can, have a fur or the faux fur. Just those different textures within your vignette will add so much. And again, add some mirrors or metallic items as well for reflection. Also having prints or vintage pictures. So all of those will really help. So some textures to think about are like your smooth objects, nubby, oh, chippy. I love chippy, coarse, shiny, rough, soft, fuzzy, fluffy, velvety. This is all different textures that you can incorporate into your vignette. And number 7, you guys, you can't forget about this, incorporating plants and greenery. And this alone will add so much. So I did a show and I thought, well, I'm just going to add some greenery and see what happens. And it just made the display, you guys. It just adds a different look and feel to your booth or to your display. Um, so you can, obviously many times you cannot have live plants or greenery. So we're going to stick with the faux. But plants not only add a pop of color, but a sense of nature and vibrancy to your arrangement. And you can do this in a couple different ways. You can, so what I have done is I just buy the stems and I group a couple of them together. So I'll grab 3 stems and I'll tuck them in here and there throughout my booth or my vignette. And this alone just adds so much just to have that greenery. So like for spring, you can have like some daffodils or some pink flowers. For the holidays, you can add some boughs and things like that. So you can change it up through the seasons, but price it all because people are going to want to buy that, you guys. So as you're nestling it in, tucking it in, definitely make sure all of these items are priced. Now, another way you can add greenery is using planters. And you can take like some old terracotta pots, plant those up, or different containers. You can actually add in vases. You can put in some stems and vases. But again, price it all. Every item in your booth should be priced, and I'm going to say that continuously because early on, I did not price everything, and I am kicking myself that I didn't do it sooner because it just helps you when you're needing to change your vignette, which you're going to want to do often. So now that you have some greenery, keep in mind you can pair that greenery with books, decorative objects, artwork, just whatever, tuck it here and there wherever you'd like. Tip number 8, you guys, is leave some breathing room. I know that I do this as well, is I have to resist to overcrowd the space. So many times when I have things in my car and I keep grabbing items and I want to keep adding because I always think if it's not in the booth, it's not going to sell. And I have to resist that urge to overcrowd because if it's overcrowded or there's too much or it doesn't really go with that vignette, people are not going to notice it. So give each piece some breathing room so customers can appreciate, all your individual items and imagine really how they're going to use them in their homes. If you have them displayed properly and the customer can really envision that's how they're going to use them in their home, then you're going to get a sale. So, overly cluttered spaces can definitely overwhelm and distract your customers and really distract them from your beautiful piece. So, tip number 9, lighting. This is so key, you guys. I started playing around with lighting a while ago, and it just really enhances your vignette. It brightens everything up. It creates a warm, inviting atmosphere. While spotlights can highlight specific pieces, consider like having just a little lamp lit in the background. It just makes the whole space feel much more warm and inviting. So if you have a vintage desk, place a lamp on that desk, have it lit. Most of your vendor booth locations, or the locations where you're located in, they do have where all the lights shut off in the evening, and you can use the light bulbs that are very efficient on wattage, so you're not wasting electricity or anything like that. But and keep in mind, this is where I went wrong a couple times. Make sure when you're getting a light bulb that you have more of like the soft light versus the harsh out. I think there's one like outdoor light, it says, or something like that. It's very harsh and bright. So with my spotlights, I've just noticed too that facing it down on like my key piece or my focal point piece will light that up. And then I will also add some ambiance in the background with some other lamps or different lighting like that. And you can pick up lamps very inexpensively. So I'm always on the lookout for lighting for my booth. Now, tip number 10, you guys, is regular refreshing and rearranging. I the topic comes up so often is, how often should I refresh? How often should I rearrange? And you should really be at your booth every single week. I I am guilty. I Life gets in the way. So I know how difficult this is to get to your booth and rearrange and move things about. But as pieces are selling, you definitely want to add additional pieces and rearrange. Restaging an entire vignette is a lot of work. It is. So in the interim, while you have your vignette in there, make sure that you are going in and checking on it, moving things about, because let me tell you, customers are not kind. When they pick up an item and they look, they may think they want it and then they start walking out and they set it about. And I have come into my booth and I just shake my head and think, what in the heck happened in here? Because things are moved all over. Plus, as things are selling, so you may have had a very impactful look by having 5 different suitcases for sale and then 3 of them sold. So now you only have 2. You have to figure out how you're going to rearrange that to make it still eye appealing. So keep that in mind. You definitely want to keep, going in, checking on things. Um, the other thing with rotating your items is that sometimes your vignette may look totally appealing to you, but some items could definitely still be hid. So by rotating those around, it will, like, the next time that customer comes in, because you will have repeat customers, they will see that in a total different light just simply by rotating it. Um, and the other thing that everyone in my membership group will ask me, do you run sales? I do not. You do not want to get customers in the habit of thinking that you're always running a sale, because they may like something, but they may think, well, I'm going to take a chance that it is going to be on sale within so many weeks, and they'll pass it by. So unless they like really absolutely had that urge to have it, they'll walk by that item. So that's another thought to think about, is just continuously rotate and don't run sales. Now, regularly reassess your selection too of your items, like I said, and make sure that you're adding in weekly new pieces. So maybe you had a ton more you wanted to put in this vignette, but there wasn't enough room because you didn't want to overcrowd it. Have those on the shelf ready to go to restock as you're selling pieces, because you will. You're going to be selling items if you have things strategically placed correctly. Also, don't be afraid to try out something different. Something like, I mean, move things in an area that you normally would not do, regroup things. So, it's all about experimenting with what you like and the look that you're going for in your vendor booth. So, really to recap today, my top 10 is to start off by doing some homework. Make sure that you know what style you like and try to replicate that. So as you guys are playing around with creating a vignette, go to a local store, try to replicate what they're doing or what you like. That's the easiest way. Then come up with a theme, or a story, and then choose your focal point. And that's what I love is I just sit in by all of my thrifted pieces and I just start thinking and I start brainstorming. And that main focal point really will drive the entire look and feel of my vignette. And it might not even be the main focal point. It might just be one piece that I've thrifted and that piece has a color on it. And then that will drive my whole entire theme. It could be that it's spring and I'm going to have my whole booth look all things spring. So keep that in mind. So after you have your focal point picked, then you want to start adding layers. Start with the medium pieces and then go to smalls. Keep in mind, I did not mention this earlier, that when you're adding layers and height, everything does not have to be flat against the wall. Turn items, when you're layering them, angle them as you're adding height. That also creates a visual interest. Okay. And then, consider grouping liked objects together. Definitely always consider doing it in odd numbers. It's much more appealing to the eye than evens. And adding textures, you guys. I always love to add different wood pieces. I love adding, glassware with that hobnail on it. I like to add clear glass, colored glass, what have you, uh, pillows, blankets. It just adds to your entire vignette by mixing different textures and materials. So, definitely consider that. And then, incorporate your greenery and plants. That too just really brings life to your vignette. I don't know why one piece of greenery does that, but it does. And it just totally changes the look and feel of your entire vignette. And then leave breathing room. We are so trained to just pack as much stuff in there as we possibly can to take advantage of every single nook and cranny. Hold back because I do this as well. I have all these items still in my car. And as I'm staging it, I'm like, oh, I want to get one more piece in. I want to just put one more thing in. Try to hold back and remember these pieces will be there to restock. They will. And it will benefit you if it's not overcluttered. I feel like this is an area that I really need to work on myself because I always am in the mindset if it's not in my booth, it won't sell, but you do have to give items breathing room. So keep that in mind. Play around with lighting. This I have definitely been playing around with, and it just adds, a different ambience and feel to your booth. Also, make sure that you do have, spotlights to spotlight specific items in your booth if you can, because that, definitely put a spotlight on your main focal piece because that will draw the eye in, and then people will be more apt to enter. And then, like I said, have little lamps sitting about because that too, oh, I just love it. I love when I go to a booth that has a good lighting. And then lastly, you guys, tip number 10, like I said, rearrange and refresh your booth. Try to get there every week. I know life gets in the way. I know things happen, but honestly, within a very short period of time, your booth can look completely chaotic and unkept. Customers are not kind. They don't care where they set things down. They don't think like, oh, she had it positioned just like this. I'm going to put it right back. So definitely go in and fluff and rearrange add more items to your booth. So when things sell, you can make it look new and fresh again. So, like I said, it's all about experimenting and really looking at what you like. So, I hope that you walk away from today's episode with one tip or trick that's going to help you with your own vendor booth. And just like I said, experiment and see what works for you in your own vendor booth. So, I'm so excited you guys stuck around for today's episode. Now, in next week's episode, I am going to be conducting my next interview. It is with my good friend Heather Davis from Create Your Own Cozy. And if you haven't met Heather yet, she is very well known for her YouTube channel. She is a chronic DIY girl who loves to thrift and upcycle for her home and her vendor booths. I can't wait to share her small business journey with you. So join me next week for that. And you guys, if you haven't yet, and you are listening on any of the podcast platforms, definitely don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. If you are watching this over on YouTube, definitely hit the like button, share it with a friend. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, definitely do that. And in the comments, you guys, let me know what future guests that you'd like to see or topics that you'd like to see me cover. All right, you'll also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Sonnet's Garden Blooms, and I post a whole lot more content over there on a daily basis. But I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I cannot wait to see you guys all next week. Bye.